Too Much Information is a production of iHeart Radio.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Too Much Information, the show that gives you the secret histories and little-known fascinating facts and figures behind your favorite TV shows, music, movies, and more. We are your two Hong Kong-trained stuntmen of stultifying trivia. I'm Alex Heigl.
And I'm Jordan Runtagh. Are we trained in opera, too?
Yes. Commedia dell'arte. And Peking opera. Jordan, today we are looking at one of the biggest movies by one of my personal heroes, the movie that broke an already huge international star big in the US, added an entry into the canon of mismatched buddy cop comedies, and taught us all to love again. That's right. I'm talking about The Mummy, Tomb of the Dragon Emperor. It's Mum You Arch on Too Much Information. The bit never dies.
This joke is now in its seventh proud week.
No, we're talking about 1998's Rush Hour, which turns 25 in September.
Oh, yeah, wow.
That one hits hard. Yeah, I mean, I make no bones about the fact that I think Jackie Chan should be up there with like Orson Welles or Beyonce in terms of auteurism. I don't think you can really combine. There's no one like Jack. There's no one like Jackie.
Yeah.
Full stop. I mean, he's an Olympic level athlete, a hilarious physical comedian, and a filmmaker and an auteur.
And a singer.
And a singer. Yes. Singer-songwriter, clothing magnate.
Car collector.
Yeah, I don't know. His career in the U.S. is so fascinating to me, even as not like a, even outside of the like influence of Hong Kong action movies on Hollywood in the 90s, which we'll talk about. But it bums me out a little bit because he should have been like a Stallone or, when you see this stuff, because like by the time he came over here, he was 41,
Wow.
So he was kind of not past his prime. I mean, he's incredible in this movie and for like the other stuff that made a lot of money in the States, but like
that's like Tom Brady, like now,
exactly.
It's like
yeah, and like the stuff that he did in the 80s, when you watch it, it's like you're like, why did I ever find Stallone or Van Damme or any of those guys impressive? They look like children. I mean, like I get Van Damme is a beautiful man. And I get the like Arnold is just like a freak of nature and Stallone has, his charms as well. But like every single one, they look like toddlers when you're looking at compared to the stuff that Jackie Chan was doing in the 80s. I mean, not just the fighting, but like the stunt work and it's just it boggles my mind. And Jackie Chan didn't fail the US. The US failed Jackie. I didn't see a lot of that stuff until it came over here, because I think like Rumble in the Bronx was the first thing that I saw from him. And then I started just going back through whatever the video store had, but a lot of it wasn't available. So like, I didn't see Armor of God. I didn't see Super Cop, which has like the crazy stunt where he fire pole slides down a pole strung with light bulbs that explode on the way down. I didn't see that kind of stuff until like right before Rush Hour came out. And I don't think like Rush Hour was such a letdown to me, not because it's not a funny movie and so much of it is the chemistry between them and the comedy, but I was just like, he was jumping in between buildings on Rumble in the Bronx and crawling over live coals in Legend of Drunken Master. And then he gets over here, and we'll talk about this later, but like American stunt guys are like, yeah, you can't do that here, dude.
We'll lose what little bit of insurance we've been able to get on you.
Yeah. So I don't know. Was this your first experience with him? Did you get any of this stuff in your corner of the world?
I mean, my first experience with Jackie Chan was when my social studies teacher in middle school was clearly hungover and would come in and put on, for reasons that I still don't understand, Shanghai Noon and Shanghai Nights. Yeah, I know. We didn't watch those at friends' houses. I watched that in the classroom. So yeah, I have to say those movies was not the best first impression of Jackie Chan, because at that time
he was 49 when that movie came out.
Jesus Christ. Wow. I mean, the stunts were fine. To me, it was a comedy first experience. Yeah. And I always likened him, at least at that time, to Jerry Lewis, who I just have never liked, especially as a kid. I mean, later on, I kind of grew to appreciate Jerry Lewis as kind of a, comedic ballet dancer, much in the way that the French have grown to love Jerry
Just
Lewis.
one of your many similarities with the French.
Exactly. And, it's similar to how I feel about Jackie Chan. I eventually learned about his background in the Hong Kong cinema as sort of the guy who came out as the heir apparent, really, to Bruce Lee, friend of the pod, Bruce Lee, following his death in 1973. And then, of course, I learned about the fact that he was, as you said, like the very definition of all-around entertainer, from body work to singing to acting to basically mastering every single technical aspect of filmmaking.
Catering.
It's astonishing. Catering. Yes. Yeah. I mean, I'm going to ask you more about that later. Yeah. And that's when it kind of gradually dawned on me that this man is an entertainment god. I mean, he deserves, if he hasn't won the Presidential Medal of Freedom yet or gotten like a Kennedy Center honor or something like that, he damn well should. I can't pretend to be a martial arts fan, but it's still thrilling to watch any master at work at their chosen craft. So it's always fun to watch clips of his and movies of his for me.
Yeah, it really is wild. I mean, it's like if Michael Jordan were Buster Keaton.
Yeah,
Wow,
that's an incredible analogy.
Like that's just the level of physicality and that you're working with. I mean, and he's the other thing that I love about him too is that he clearly has such a sense of reverence for that tradition. Like he talks about seeing Buster Keaton in Charlie Chaplin movies and being like, "Oh, that's what I want to do." I love people who have developed such a specific vision for what they want to accomplish, And I mean, like we'll talk about, he does have that thing of like Raymond Chow and Golden Harvest. These guys were like, "Oh, we need a new Bruce Lee. You're it." And he was like, "No, I want to make people laugh by nearly killing myself." and stuck with it. And the like Brett Ratner said by the time he was making Rush Hour, he's like, he's been making movies longer than I have been alive, And it's just, they broke the mold when they made him. Well, from the struggles of making a movie in which it is the first time one of your leads is speaking English on camera and the other of your leads is Chris Tucker, to the movie's role in establishing one of the biggest pillars in online film criticism, to Chan's somewhat conflicted mindset about the franchise after the fact, here is everything you didn't know about Rush Hour. A little about our man Jackie. He was born in 1954 in British Hong Kong to parents who were political refugees from the Chinese Civil War.
According to Jackie lore, he spent 12 months in his mother's womb, leading her to nickname him Cannonball, which is an evocative nickname, but I don't totally understand.
He popped out and immediately was on fire.
Exactly. I mean, aren't there rumors about his parents? Like his dad was like a national spy and his mom smuggled opium or something?
I'm not super familiar with, like, I didn't want to step in it talking about the history of Hong Kong and Chinese and British occupation and stuff that I don't know too much about, but I think...
Well, let me, because I know even less.
Well, I mean, we talked about this a little bit with the Bruce Lee stuff. I mean, the movie industry is kind of always rife with corruption, and Hong Kong was a very interesting place in the middle of the century. And so I think any of these people who were in politics or entertainment or big enough figures in that city probably touched those worlds at one point. But what have you heard?
I heard that his mom like smuggled opium before Jackie was born and had some kind of connection to the Chinese underworld. And this may be related to the connection with his mother, or it may be related to just, as you said, being part of the film industry in Hong Kong. But I guess I've read that Jackie got mixed up with the Triad gang who harassed him a bunch of times over the years, like would shoot at him when he got off a plane and stuff like that. And it supposedly got so bad that he started carrying not only guns, but grenades in case he had to challenge them to like a showdown, which is
like,
just
you
the
people
first
don't scare me.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's the first of many don't mess with Jackie Chan stories.
What can you do to me I haven't done to myself?
I mean, have you heard any of that?
No, it's a little bit of what I was reading about the background of Hong Kong cinema in the 80s is that like sort of the parallel threads other than like this crazy martial arts stunt stuff and sort of that kind of grew as an offshoot of the what we think of as like the Grindhouse era, the historical like wuxia style epics that like the Wu-Tang were obsessed with. The other thing is like the John Woo, Chow Yun-Fat like holding two guns and a toothpick in your mouth and sliding down a banister and shooting someone 50 times. And they, which is like a huge influence on, 90s Hollywood action movies. But like a lot of that came from, was like, they were like mob movies. And so, once the triad saw that they were famous and the worlds did start to overlap kind of in the same way that like the mafia did in Hollywood, in the music industry. And so, Hong Kong is not America. Like it's, by which I mean, you are going to bump into people who are involved in that world just by virtue of it being, not even the size of California. Is it? We should fact check that.
I don't think so. Yeah, no. And then his dad, I heard that like his alleged spy activities were so intense that he changed his name to protect his family. And then Jackie didn't find out about this until the 90s, at which point Jackie changed his Chinese name to reflect what it would have been had his dad not been forced to change it.
Yeah, it's odd. His dad emigrated to Australia in 1960 to work for another consulate, to work for as a cook again. But then they sent Jackie back to Hong Kong to board and study at a Peking Opera School. And Peking Opera School is insane. I mean,
no joke.
Yeah.
Did he have some kind of estranged relationship with his family as a result of being like sent away to boarding school as a kid?
I mean,
maybe I heard
maybe
something.
that Peking Opera stuff is borderline abusive.
Yeah.
So maybe he didn't take too kindly to that.
Yeah,
his son is also kind of a up from what I've heard, or from what I've seen anyway. He's like arrested for drugs and stuff. And
Jackie's son, is he in the industry at all? Or
I don't think so. I think he's just kind of a ne'er-do-well idiot. I mean, the sort of the sad part about Jackie, at least from like a Western perspective, is that he's moved closer to the Communist Party as he's like gotten richer and become more of a part of like the Chinese establishment. I'm not getting too into
has he or
Chinese
has he been forced to say
he's
that?
talked about wanting to like become a member of the communist political authority.
Well, again, has he or has he been forced to say that after Hong Kong was...
I mean, that's an interesting question. I know that like Zhang Ziyi, the actress who's in Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon and House of Flying Daggers, were her big like, Hollywood breaks. She has talked about being like essentially sex trafficked through the movie industry to like prominent communist politicians. It's really gross. It's really gross and really sad. Yeah.
Jackie with his son apparently has said he's gone out of his way to say that he's leaving none of his $100+ million fortune to him because, quote, if he is capable, he can make his own money. And if he's not, then he will just be wasting my money.
Jesus.
Yeah.
Yeah. JC Chan served 6 months for dealing weed, which is hilarious. He attended William and Mary in Virginia for 2 semesters.
Fellow Virginia boy.
And left because all you can see in Virginia is sheep.
Can you confirm?
That's not true. But maybe in William and Mary. I don't know. No, it looks like he tried to make it in the movie industry, but yeah, he's in 2014, a Chinese paper ranked J.C. Chan as one of China's top wastrel nouveau riche. That's rough.
Oh my God.
Oh. Well,
back
anyway,
to little Jackie Chan being sent away from his parents to attend this entertainment boot camp known as the Peking Opera School. Tell us about that.
Peking Opera is, I mean, it's got a little bit of commedia dell'arte in it. There's like stock roles that people learn. There's like the strongman role and the clown role, but it really is a very uniquely Chinese form of art in that it's everyone in it is a singer and acrobatist and an acrobat and trained in martial arts, and it's very comedic and very stylized, but the training is really, really rigorous. I mean, teachers would pick kids at like the age of 3 to apprentice, and then you train for like 7 or 10 years for like 12 hours a day in a boarding school environment, and they would, beat on them with canes and stuff, and it was really, really crazy. And so you get a little bit of martial arts and you get a little bit of acrobatics, but you also get like a lot of his really stylized mugging, like the faces he makes and stuff come from that tradition. It's kind of like vaudeville. It's basically like if a vaudeville actor and singer was also like a boxer.
Well, I would say was taught by Joe Jackson and Barry Gordy.
And Mike Tyson's trainer. Yeah, so it's like there's a lot of that, and what else was I gonna say about it? He was there for 10 years. And then but he also did he did a lot of training in other styles of martial arts once he graduated there. Chinese martial arts is interesting because there's like some of the stuff that he does is pretty straight kung fu, and then some of it is like wushu, and it is really kind of a big blend of everything. I mean, probably one of the most famous ones is Legend of Drunken Master, which is like everyone knows like drunken kung fu is like a style of kung fu, and but he's he was trained in a lot of other stuff, and you can see it in a lot of his different fight scenes. There's a scene in probably one of my favorite fight scenes of his is in Wheels on Meals. Is it
Meals on Wheels?
Meals on Wheels, where he fights an actual kickboxer named Benny the Jet, who reportedly did not like him and did not pull his punches. And those men, they're actually beating the crap out of each other. It's wild.
I think he accidentally hit Jackie at one point, and then Jackie hit him back on purpose.
Yeah.
If I recall.
Ugh.
I mean, one of my favorite things about Jackie is that for all of his physical gifts, he supposedly hates violence in real life and claims to have only been in one fight, and that was because his friends dragged him into it. Do we think that's true, or do we think that's just part of his, to protect his image? One of those great stories.
Maybe. I don't think he's like Bruce Lee, who is just like, I will fight God.
And even, yeah. Yes.
Because Jackie's an entertainer,
Yeah.
he wants to make people happy.
I mean, even in Rush Hour, he doesn't kill anyone. There's 12 people who die in Rush Hour. 2 are killed by the leads, but both of those 2 are killed by Chris Tucker. Apparently, fans don't really realize that he's not quick to fight, not like Bruce Lee, because one of them came up to him while filming Rush Hour 2 in 2001 and sucker punched him in the stomach, thinking that Jackie would block it.
No.
Which, if memory serves, is how Houdini died.
Yeah, very much so. Oh, that's horrible.
Yeah.
Much like Bruce Lee, Jackie Chan started acting as a child. I think his first roles were when he was like 6 or 8 or something like that. And you can see him in Fist of Fury and Enter the Dragon as he kind of, and he started his day rate when he was a stuntman was something like 80 cents a day, something piddling for getting the crap kicked out of him. But he tells this story over and over again on being on Enter the Dragon and getting beat up by Bruce Lee and playing up that he was injured more, so Bruce Lee would come over and comfort him.
Oh, that's right. I remember when we did our Enter the Dragon episode.
Yeah.
I remember talking about that. Yeah, I mean, Jackie later said that the most painful injury he ever received, of many, as we'll get into, was when Bruce accidentally whacked him in the face with nunchucks while filming Enter the Dragon. Thankfully, this did not damage their relationship because Jackie tells us, I love this is one of my favorite stories in the history of the series. Jackie tells the story of walking to a bowling alley one day when he passed Bruce Lee on the street, and Bruce was like, "Oh, hey Jackie, what are you doing? Where are you going?" "Oh, I'm off to the bowling alley." "Oh, can I come too?" And so Bruce Lee invites himself along on Jackie Chan's like bowling date, and Jackie said he spent the whole game trying to keep autograph seekers away from Bruce. And then about 2 weeks later, 10 days later, Bruce died really mysteriously of cerebral edema, just 32 years old.
Yeah, and we mentioned, kind of at the top of the episode that there was just a vacuum in the wake of Bruce's death. And actually at the Alamo Draft House here in San Francisco, they have a bunch of posters from around the time because, Bruce was a Bay Area dude. And so there's all these posters from the era where they were just trying to push anyone who looked like him and who they could spell his name similar to. There's Bruce L.E., Bruce L.I., Bruce E. Lee. Like, it was so egregious. And Jackie was one of those guys. But, based on his love of Buster Keaton and Charlie Chaplin and his Peking opera training, he was like, I'm going to do my own thing. And, by 1979, he had been in a few movies. The first one that he writes and directs and stars in is 1979's The Fearless Hyena.
Don't forget the porn that he was in, 1975's All in the Family, which is the worst name for a porn I could possibly think of. I think that's a tag on Pornhub.
Oh.
I stole that joke from Noel. He was naked in this movie, but he didn't actually have sex with anybody. And Jackie later said of his porn career, I had to do anything I could to make a living, but I don't think it's a big deal. Even Marlo Brandon. That's what Archie Bunker calls Marlon Brando in an episode of All in the Family. So you know what? I'm leaving that flub in because that fits. Archie Bunker's in my head. Even Marlon Brando used to be exposed in his movies. The porn world at that time was more conservative than the current films.
That's an interesting quote.
Yeah.
He made an aborted attempt to cross over into Hollywood around this time. He's in Cannonball Run, which is funny, given his in utero nickname. But then he focuses on Hong Kong in the 80s, and by 85 he has established his own stunt team. Sort of the trinity around him at this time is Sammo Hung and a guy named Yuen Biao. And Sammo is amazing. He's known for being a thick king. Who can still do like backflips and stuff. They were buddies at the Peking Opera School, and the Jackie Chan stunt team is formed in 85 on, I think, Armor of God, but I might be wrong about that. And what is his name in Armor of God? It's something ridiculous. It's like an explicit Indiana Jones thing. I think it's his character's name is Asia Hawk or something like that.
Oh my God.
But yeah, the stuntmen thing is like they're his boys.
Yeah, I love
they're the
that.
TCB crew.
This is Memphis Mafia of Jackie Chan's career. I love that. What I think I read that they go by the name Singkar Pan. Do you know what that means?
It doesn't.
It doesn't really translate.
No, it means something like the gang of
the boys.
The TCB Mafia. Yeah. Chan's family group.
Oh, okay. I mean,
the boys.
That's exactly. Yeah, and they've worked with him. I read at least on upwards of 28 films, probably more at this point.
It was 83, and it was Project A, which is amazing. And it was great because it meant that they got insurance and better pay, which is adorable.
Well, whenever they couldn't get insurance, which was often, Jackie would pay out of his own pocket. And why weren't they uninsurable? Well, let's do a quick rundown of his injuries, shall we?
Please.
For Jackie Chan, doing his own stunts was very important to him, not just because of his worship of Bruce Lee, but he also, as you said, admired early silent film era comedies like The General by Buster Keaton. Buster Keaton was his big hero, which is really interesting to me. Again, as you said, it goes back to his Peking opera training of wanting to be this all-around entertainer. But in the act of performing his own stunts, he has broken his nose, you say 4 times, his ankle once, most of the fingers in his hand, both cheekbones, and his skull. And this was his worst injury. It was during the filming of 1986's Armor of God, when he's performing what he has called a, quote, simple stunt, where he swung from a tree, and unfortunately he fell and hit his head on a rock, which necessitated a metal plate being put into his head. And as a result of this, he has a quarter-sized indentation in his skull, which he will sometimes invite people to stick their fingers into. I know. And I mean, hilariously, his stunt team more recently is used less for action stuff and more for boring stuff, like where the character's just supposed to like drive or walk around, because it just gives Jackie a chance to actually take a break on the set and rest.
Yeah. And, a big famous thing for him is he puts the bloopers over the end credits of all of his movies. And the thing that I've taken away from that is it is so easy to injure yourself doing regular stuff. Like the ones that look the most painful are the one where there's like a kick that's been like mistimed slightly and he gets like caught in the cornea and just collapses. And it's like, man, how did you? And then like the stuff where he's like crawling across live coals and all this stuff. He's like, yeah, well, I got that. But then I fell and now I have a quarter-sized hole in my head. His hearing has been affected.
Really?
The craziest one is actually on Rumble in the Bronx, where he broke his ankle and they still had a bunch of filming to do. So they just put a sock over his cast and painted it to look like a shoe and his jeans so that he could keep doing the stunts.
But wait, the cast isn't the problem. The fact that the cast is there while he
hiding a
heals
shattered
his
ankle?
broken ankle. Yes.
Yeah, I mean the famous thing is there's I forget which blooper reel it's in, but there's some where he's like being carted away on a stretcher and he just gives a big thumbs up and says, "Jackie always okay." It's like, I don't think you are, dude, but God love you. As you meditate on that, we'll be right back with more Too Much Information after these messages. So one of the through lines on his film is his sort of fanatical dedication to every aspect of it. There's this persistent rumor that one of his films has the world record for takes mandated for a single scene, which is 2,900 for a scene in The Dragon Lord, 1980, which is, I think, I've heard two different things about this that's online. One is it's a scene where it's like a human pyramid thing where a bunch of guys are like clambering over each other. And the other one is that it's a scene where these men are playing this ancient Chinese game that's basically like hacky sack and volleyball, where they're just like kicking a shuttlecock thing around with their feet and trying to make it. It's really crazy. 2,900 was not like consecutive. The idea was that this was the aggregate number of takes they needed to get footage to cut everything together. It was confirmed by Raymond Chow, I think in his biography, that he spent 40 days filming that scene, which in Hong Kong cinema terms is a decade, because they made movies in a day. And Jackie also holds the Guinness World Record for most job titles on a single movie. From actually one of his last straight out action movies is called Chinese Zodiac in 2012, in which he stars, directs, is the gaffer, and coordinated the catering.
Why? Okay, like to make the finished product on the screen look the way it does in your head, I understand that. Why catering? Why does he feel...
He has a... I'm sorry. He also did props.
But okay, that makes sense. That you want everything on the screen to look a certain way. Fine. Why cater? Why the offstage stuff?
Well, he has a chain of restaurants, so probably just to get paid over and over again. Okay. I don't know how much of it is like, how much of the stuff at this point is like state funded, so maybe he's just trying to squeeze a couple extra pennies out of them. But yes, he is also a singer. Part of his peaking opera training included vocal training. He started recording and releasing records in the 1980s, has put out 20 albums with vocals in Cantonese, Mandarin, Japanese, Taiwanese, and English. He often sings the theme songs of his films, which play over the end credits. And
over shots of him
in agonizing
up.
pain. The song Story of a Hero, which is the theme song to Police Story, was actually selected by the Hong Kong police as a part of their recruitment campaign in 1994.
I'm just hearing it as Story of a Girl.
This is the story of a cop who fractured his skull and made the whole world smile. And he was the voice of Shang in Mulan in China.
I love that. Wasn't Donny Osmond the voice in the American version? Wow.
Yep. He also has a line of clothing, movie theaters, as we mentioned, restaurants, gym, and a racing team. He formed a racing team. He's a UNICEF Goodwill ambassador.
And he ran a Segway dealership for a while.
God love him. Anyway, what I like to think of is his imperial run in Hong Kong includes Project A, Police Story, and Armor of God. That's like probably the three highest hits per screen time. You know, as we'll talk about, there's some of his movies that don't. He has vocally been like, I don't understand what's funny to Americans, and like what plays in China doesn't always play in America and vice versa. So there are some of his movies that you can just YouTube all the stuff from because it's a lot of like mugging and jokes that don't necessarily translate. But Project A, Police Story, Armor of God are really just like some of the craziest action stuff that's ever been committed. And as I chatted to you before this, Michelle Yeoh, who just won for Everything Everywhere All at Once, and I found out that Jackie Chan was actually offered the lead in that film.
No way!
And he turned it down, and so they offered it to her and retooled it to be around her. But she and Jackie go way
Whoa.
back. She's in Police Story 3 doing some of the craziest shit I've ever seen in my life. She jumps a motorcycle onto a moving train. And also in that movie,
And then rolls off the motorcycle as the train moves. Motorcycle falls off the top of the train car.
and she, I mean, you know, I think American audiences' first exposure to her was in Crouching Tiger, where she's amazing. But like, again, she was, you know, these people were decades into their career when they came over here, Chow Yun-fat included, from that film. And but yeah, she's in Police Story 3. She also does this whole thing where she's dangling off the side of a van and doing like all of these crazy backward leg bends to pull her legs out of traffic and stuff. She actually broke her back on, or almost broke her back, making a movie, and had to back away from doing a lot of that crazy stunt stuff. What else? Oh, 1994 is another great one, Legend of Drunken Master, which is probably pound for pound my favorite. It's got great fight scenes. The stunts are insane. That's the one where he crawls over live coals.
I have a question for you. You mentioned drunken kung fu being like a subgenre.
Yes.
Is that blended with comedy in the teaching of it? Like, what is, like, how did that subgenre develop?
I believe that is under sort of Shaolin Kung Fu, like the Shaolin monk tradition, because it's often grouped under the animal styles, like monkey kung fu and eagle and leopard and snake. And there's a divide between northern kung fu and southern kung fu. And if I believe, this is like reaching back to like 14-year-old nerd me, I think southern is a little bit more pragmatic and a little bit more like, I will punch you and kick you until you leave me alone. And northern is a little bit more flowery and demonstrative. So a lot of what we see in cinema is pulled from northern, because it's a little bit more, it's cooler looking, and that's where a lot of like the animal stuff comes from. Actually, if you play Tekken, the character of Lee is there's two characters in Tekken that are Jackie Chan and Bruce Lee. The Bruce Lee guy is named Law, which is funny, and all of his costumes are Bruce Lee costumes, and the guy's name is Lee is Jackie Chan, and so he does all the like drunken boxing and animal style kung fu that you can see Jack, and he wears like his costumes are also references to stuff that Jackie has worn. But yeah, that's and Drunken Master is absurd, because he, at the end fight scene, he gets drunk to power up. In the fight scenes, there's this amazing scene where his stepmom is tossing him bottles of alcohol that he's chugging in the middle of a fight, and because the other guys don't want him to power up, they keep trying to grab the alcohol away from him, and it's these amazing like Charlie Chaplin-esque bits where these bottles are flipping around in the scene, and he has to catch it and pull the cork out and chug it, and then he gets punched and falls down, and then he powers up. Which is a horrible message, by the end of the film, in the end scene, he's getting beat up, and so he drinks industrial gasoline to defeat the final villain. And the end of this movie has a coda in the original version where his character has been stricken blind from drinking this gasoline, and it's played for laughs, and it was cut from the American version because they were just like, no, Jackie, this is just, you can't do this. So it's just one of these things that like doesn't translate well, but it's really wild. That movie is one of my favorites of all time. And so by 1990 is a really interesting time in the relationship between Hong Kong and Hollywood. You know, Bruce Lee was one of the really only the people who successfully crossed over, and he died pretty immediately after it happened. So throughout the 80s, as I mentioned, you have the John Woo stuff. That's like cops and robbers stuff. And that's basically the stuff that you would see Chow Yun-fat. That's where he got one of his big stars in. Anytime you see someone in a Hollywood movie holding two guns, the dual wield, as they call it in video game terminology, that's from John Woo. The other thing that they take from it is a term that they call shoot to riddle, which is like, you see the bad guys will have like 7 squibs on their body that all go off. Like, it's not like in westerns where someone shoots and clutches their stomach and rolls over. In like Hong Kong action, like Hard Boiled and The Killer, people get shot up. And so in like stuff like Die Hard, where people are really getting like riddled with bullets, like a lot of that comes from the Hong Kong action stuff of the 80s. The Killer is a big one. Ringo Lam is another, probably like the B tier list. If John Woo is the most famous one, Ringo Lam made a movie called City on Fire in 87, which Quentin Tarantino has openly been like, I stole so much of Reservoir Dogs from City on Fire. And it's really kind of a groundswell because you see all of these guys, Akira, which is probably the single biggest crossover anime, with the exception of stuff like Dragon Ball Z or Naruto into the mid 90s, or like the Studio Ghibli stuff. Akira is really one of the ones that kind of breaks the mold. And that came out in 89 in the States. And then you get the Wu-Tang Clan come out, and something like Enter the 36 Chambers, which is just saturated with the kind of grindhouse era kung fu movies that they were obsessed with. What all this kind of gestalt translates to is that like it becomes really cool in like alternative sort of hipster American culture to be hip to like all this era of Hong Kong action stuff. I mean, in True Romance, you know, the central relationship in that is Christian Slater going to see Sonny Chiba marathon, and that's when he meets Roseanne Arquette's character. And so there was this sort of filtering up of, oh, these guys are doing really crazy stuff, and it becomes very sneakily influential. And John Woo actually crosses over to Hollywood with Hard Target 1993 starring Jean-Claude Van Damme, and then he does Broken Arrow in 96 with Travolta, and then Face Off in 97, which is the big one. And he didn't really ever get to those heights again, but he's one of the biggest figures of that time. And Jackie Chan had been, as we mentioned, he tried to break into Hollywood and then went back to Hong Kong, and he was leery about being cast as a villain and being sort of typecast as like the martial arts guy who comes in and gets beat up by the hero. And so he actually turned down the opportunity to play the villain in Demolition Man, which is a hilarious Sylvester Stallone movie that comes out in 93. And that role went to Wesley Snipes. But he was a huge star everywhere else. That's the crazy thing, is that like it took us so long to catch up to him. I mean, some of the figures that I found with, by 1995, he'd made like 70 million in Hong Kong, 415 million in Japan.
Wow.
Sold 33 million tickets across France, Germany, Italy, and Spain. But over here, he was still kind of a cult hit person. And 95, Rumble in the Bronx comes out. It is not shot in the Bronx. It is shot in Vancouver, very hilariously. And that became his biggest hit up until that point. He set records in Hong Kong, and it became the most profitable film of 1996. It made 6 times its budget back because they made these movies for super cheap. So Rush Hour comes from a script by a guy named Ross LaManna. He worked on Universal Soldier in 92, starring Dolph Lundgren, and JCVD, directed by Roland Emmerich. He worked on Cliffhanger, 93, starring Sylvester Stallone, directed by Rennie Harlan, and most germane to you.
Yes, Ross LaManna also wrote 2 episodes of a Titanic TV miniseries that came out in 1996, crucially a year before the James Cameron movie. And the cast in this made-for-TV Titanic movie is kind of nuts. There's George C. Scott as the captain of the ship, Edward James Smith, Catherine Zeta-Jones, Peter Gallagher, Mary Lou Henner, and Tim Curry. So this is the part of the episode.
As Leonardo DiCaprio?
I forget. I'm sure he was like a cabin steward or something, or some flunky, some high society flunky. So yeah, this is the part of the episode where our Venn diagram overlaps.
So Ross LaManna told screenwritersutopia.com, I wanted to do a kidnapping story, but it was like, what the hell do I do to make it fresh? Which he did not. Then it came to me, what if the victim was from a foreign country that's unfriendly to us? That'll add some jeopardy. And what if the people investigating are also foreign to each other? Wouldn't that sort of up the ante on the buddy comedy genre? In Lethal Weapon, it's fun and a good thing. But all they really, Danny Glover and Mel Gibson's characters, don't have in common is that one guy is a nut and the other guy is grounded. They really didn't make anything out of the racial differences. So I thought about everything that would be different between 2 guys working on the same case from different countries. They wouldn't even speak the same language. It's funny to me that he says all this because it's the exact plot of a movie called Red Heat, in which Arnold Schwarzenegger plays a Soviet detective who is investigating a murder with Jim Belushi.
When did that come out?
87, I think.
Okay,
it's one of the least rememberable Arnold films. 88. So he was wrong. That plot was not original. But Rush Hour is interesting in that it hinges on the handover of Hong Kong from the United Kingdom to the People's Republic of China in July of 97, which ended 156 years of British rule and ended Hong Kong as a former colony. That is a really pivotal time, obviously, in Hong Kong history. Specifically to our purposes, it was a huge threat to the action industry that I just ranted about, because basically under the one country, two systems financial infrastructure of Hong Kong at the time, they were essentially allowed to take foreign investment to make these movies. And so once they came under the rule of China again, a lot of those foreign investors, specifically Taiwanese investors, pulled all their money out. And that, combined with sort of the brain drain of a bunch of actors crossing over to Hollywood, sort of caused a fallow period in Hong Kong action cinema. It kind of killed the glory days of it. Anyway, Rush Hour is also the brainchild of a producer named Arthur Sarkisian, who had finished While You Were Sleeping, the rom-com.
George Clooney movie?
Yeah. And he claims that he knew Lamanna, and they took a meeting, and Sarkisian was like, one of my favorite movies is The French Connection, which, fair. And he's like, he told Lamanna, he was like, do this. And in a couple months, he brought him back a script called Rush Hour that was originally much darker. They said it was originally supposed to be more of an action thriller than a comedy, grittier, kind of 48 hours sort of thing. But they got Disney involved, and Disney started backing off on the tone of it. And
which makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. And then Ross Lamanna said once Jackie came on board, it became a different movie. The part was much smaller in my original drafts. The Chris Tucker part was more Wesley Snipes or Bruce Willis. It was a little edgier. I kept reading that Chris Farley was supposed to star in this movie, which I wasn't able to verify from any like original source, but it's something that keeps coming up. Now, you may be saying to yourself, but Alex, I thought Rush Hour was produced by New Line Cinemas. And you're right, it was. And what happened was Sarkisian had just done While You Were Sleeping at Disney, so he brought it to them. And they brought on a writer named Jim Koof to do a new draft. And it gets a little more comedic, and everyone involved in this film starts saying 48 Hours, which is an obvious influence on it. The Nick Nolte, Eddie Murphy movie, deeply groundbreaking film as far as the mismatched guys come together to solve a crime. One of them's wisecracking, one of them's tough, and anyway. So everyone's saying we wanted to do 48 Hours. But there's a bunch of LA Times articles about this movie, which is funny, because after it became a huge hit, they started going around to the studio heads who passed on it. So they brought it to Disney. Disney bought the script, and it went into development with a guys named Roger Birnbaum and Joe Roth. And Joe Roth, who is the guy at Disney, told the LA Times, I had 7 good reasons for not wanting to make this movie, including, among them, he didn't like the script. He didn't have any faith in Jackie Chan's ability to be a lead star. He was busy in other things. Sarkisian at this point had Brett Ratner on board as director because Brett Ratner had just done Money Talks for New Line, starring Chris Tucker. And he said, so I added up all 7 and came up with the wrong answer. This movie was a huge hit, as we will discuss. So eventually what happens is that Disney balks at the budget. And so they decide against greenlighting it. It goes into turnaround, which is the term when other studios can start bidding on stuff. Fox passed, Universal passed, because they just wouldn't meet the producers' deals. And funnily enough, before they landed on Chris Tucker, Martin Lawrence was considered for this. Dave Chappelle was considered this. And Eddie Murphy turned this down to do what, Jordan?
Holy man. He chose poorly. And yeah, Eddie Murphy predictably later deeply regretted the decision. He's quoted as saying, it's funny when I think of it now. It was like, you can go jump all over California with Jackie Chan or go to Miami and wear a robe for 3 months. And I went to Miami and you see the results.
And so they went to New Line, and it's funny because New Line actually, they should have gone to New Line first, man, because New Line basically was a sort of they had an existing relationship with the world of Hong Kong cinema. One of their first big hits that wasn't, because New Line is called The House That Freddie Built. Do you know about New Line Cinema? It's super fascinating.
Not much, no. I know a little bit just through you about Freddy Krueger and
Ninja
the
Turtles.
Nightmare on Elm Street series. Oh yeah, and Ninja Turtles.
So New Line started as this guy, the head of it, whose name I just watched a bunch of stuff about Nightmare on Elm Street, and I already forgot this guy's name. Robert Shea is the guy who founded it. He literally drove reels of Reefer Madness and John Waters stuff around to theaters out of the trunk of his car. And so one of their big successes, their first huge success, was the first Nightmare on Elm Street. And in order to become a legitimate studio, they had to keep cranking these out. But like they became sort of a breeding ground, not just Wes Craven, but Rennie Harlin, who did, has become a big name action director and did all this stuff, did a Nightmare on Elm Street sequel. That was one of his first movies. So they're known as the house that Freddy built, because that was how, and obviously they went on to do friggin' Lord of the Rings and make more money than God. But they also did Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, which was a co-production with Golden Harvest, which is one of the big Hong Kong action martial arts companies. And they also were the U.S. distributor for First Strike and Mr. Nice Guy, which are two other Jackie Chan movies. So they had an existing relationship there. And New Line told the producers that they greenlight this film, but it has to star Chris Tucker, because Chris Tucker had just done Money Talks with Brett Ratner. And the other reason was that they were like, we have Martin Lawrence on here, but Martin Lawrence costs $7 million and Chris Tucker is getting $2 million. Because all Chris Tucker had really done at this point, he was a Def Jam comedy guy. He had done Money Talks, and he kind of steals a lot of scenes in The Fifth Element and Friday. But he wasn't as big of a star. And so they were like, we go with the cheaper guy who we already know has a relationship with Brett Ratner. And Birnbaum, the producer, said he had been checkmated and had to go hat in hand to Martin Lawrence's agent and tell him that Martin's out, Chris Tucker's in, which he described to the LA Times as one of the worst conversations with anyone I've ever had to have in this business. It sounded very traumatic for him.
Now I want to look up who Martin Lawrence's manager was.
Ooh.
So Beerbaum and Brett Ratner flew to South Africa, where Jackie Chan was filming a movie called Who Am I? And he wanted to meet Jackie Chan. Brett Ratner was a huge fan of his. And all three went out to a long dinner to talk about this new project. It was going to be Rush Hour. And Brett Ratner sent Jackie Chan a copy of Money Talks just to kind of give him an idea of what he could do. And so the wheels of the film were already in motion. Brett Ratner told GQ in 2017, I got on a plane and I flew 22 hours to have lunch with Jackie. We get to the restaurant. It's a Chinese restaurant in South Africa. So weird. And he feeds me abalone. It was like a piece of rubber. And I'm chewing it and spitting it into my napkin. Then he gives me a glass of wine. Brett Ratner doesn't drink or smoke, and I have to pretend like I'm drinking it. And then Jackie's like, let's smoke a cigar. And I'm like, is this guy testing me? What the hell? These are all the things that I don't do.
Yeah, Ratner, it must be said, has a number of sexual assault allegations against him that came out in 2017. He also is famously the guy who used a homophobic slur talking about rehearsing for the Oscars segment that he was producing. So he sucks, and I hate him and most of his movies. But his love for Jackie is very evident. There's a Charlie Rose interview where he is waxing about Jackie to the degree that I go to wax about Jackie. He says, Jackie has a mastery of over seemingly every aspect of filmmaking. He says he knows where his light is. If I tell him what lens I'm using, he knows where its focus is. He knows where to stand. He's been making movies longer than I've been alive. There's no actor in the world that could do what he does. Act, martial arts, stunts, direct, edit. He was on the set before I was on the set, and his call time is 2 hours after mine. And Ratner, again, like, to his begrudging credit, litters Rush Hour with a bunch of specific gags from Chan's earlier films. Like, that's how much of a fanboy he was. And he said that after, when Chan came back to him and Sarkisian and said, I'll do the film, he said it was because Ratner didn't BS him in his pitch. You know, he said, I did the movie because every producer in Hollywood, every big director in Hollywood I meet says, Jackie, the script is brilliant. You're going to be a huge star. It's going to be incredible. It's going to be great. And I said, Jackie, this script is horrible, but I know what to do with it. And I was honest. Which, yeah, kudos. I just love how everyone in this movie, like, the Sarkisian is also like, yeah, the script was awful.
And Jackie still hates this movie.
And Jackie still hates the movie. But, well, you know, as we will find out now, I don't know how much of the script actually made it into the movie because Chris Tucker improvised like 90% of it. A big thing about their relationship is the first time they met, which is hilarious. They've talked about it in multiple interviews. Their dynamic in the film was not far off of reality. Tucker told the New York Post in 2001, "I knew who Jackie was. I've always been a big fan. So I was telling him what we could do to make the movie good and stuff. And he was looking at me like, who is this black man talking to me?" I thought he didn't know English because he didn't say one word. I said, "This man's not talking. How are we going to do this movie?" And in that same interview, Jackie Chan says, "My English is not that good, but he speaks very terrible English too." And people transliterate Jackie's bits directly, his quotes directly, so it sounds like I'm doing a racist imitation, but this is just what he says. He says, "He talked to me and I say to my manager, 'What happened? Is my English getting worse?' But my manager said he don't understand him either." And Tucker elaborated this in 2018 to East Coast Radio. He said, "I was kind of scared because Jackie didn't say anything in the first meeting where we met each other. We were in a meeting talking about the movie. Jackie didn't say anything the whole time. He was just nodding his head. I pulled Brett Ratner aside after the meeting. I was like, does he speak English? There's no way we can do this movie if he doesn't speak English. I got to have him communicating with me." And Brett Ratner says, "Oh, he's just checking you out. He's Chinese. That's what they do." "Well, I need him to say something." So that was the whole thing when I came up with the line, "Do you understand the words that are coming out of my mouth?" The first time I met him, I was like, does he understand English? I just took that, and that was in the movie. And Ratner said he knew that was the moment that the movie would work. This is a quote where he's talking to GQ. He's like, "They had a conversation for 30 minutes. 'I love you, Jackie. You're the man.'" And Jackie was all, "Thank you, thank you, thank you again." Halfway through, Chris says, "Brett, can we talk outside for a minute?" And I go, "Yeah." And we go outside, and Chris says, "Brett, Jackie Chan doesn't speak English. How are we going to do a movie when he doesn't speak English?" I said, "Oh, it'll be fine." Anyway, we go back in. Chris leaves. I said, "Jackie, how do you like Chris?" And Jackie says, "I like Chris, but I don't understand how he talks." I said to myself, this is going to be genius. And this is one of my favorite interviews of all time. I want to get you reacting. Okay, this is him talking to the Academy.
You've worked with so many interesting people through the years, so many great co-stars, both the comedic stuff and the serious stuff. Who are some of the actors that you've worked with that it became a friendship that means a lot to you, or maybe it's a connection that you have with them that professionally you like?
I think Chris Tucker.
He just beams from ear to ear.
Oh. Even though I don't like him in the beginning.
Tell us about that part.
First time I met him in William Morris' office, and he just keep talking. I just look at that guy. Why he keep talking? And and he's so fast. Mostly people like Brett Ratner and like my manager, Jackie. The movie is really good for you. I understand, And Chris Tucker, how they can do that? Then after he left, then I asked my manager, what the hell are you talking about? I don't even one word come from his mouth, and later on he used it in the movie.
I love that so much. And yeah, the language barrier was the biggest issue on the set. I mean, so Rumble in the Bronx was shot in Canada and it was dubbed in English, but everyone spoke their own languages on the set. Jackie is speaking Cantonese and the other actors, the Canadian actors, are speaking English. And so this was his first movie that he was going to speak English in. And that was going to be enough of a hill to climb. But then there's the fact that Chris Tucker just improvises constantly. And Ratner told the LA Times, Jackie has a hard enough time with his own dialogue. The way he remembers dialogue is by remembering the last word of Chris's sentence. 99% of the time, that word never comes. Oh. That was very hard for Jackie. It freaked him out.
Yeah, there's a very sad quote from Jackie where he said, "If I turned the page of a script and I saw another dialogue scene, the whole night I wouldn't be able to sleep. I not only have to remember my lines, I have to remember Chris Tucker's lines. But every time, it's always different dialogue with him. He's always making things up."
It's so sad. He made Jackie sad.
I know. I hate that.
Tucker told the LA Times he didn't even notice that Jackie was distressed by this until Ratner told him. There's a making of documentary of this on YouTube, and it's really funny because it's just the two of them sitting in a car, and Chris Tucker is just it's not particularly funny, but that's what happens when you improvise. You just do bits and see what sticks. And he's just going on and on about this girl that he's dating, she's really ugly, but she can cook, and she lives in Crenshaw, and there's a long bit, and Jackie just looks at him at the end and goes, "You really like to talk, huh?" And as he mentions in the clip, they are now friends. The second Rush Hour takes place in Hong Kong, and they went to a karaoke bar. And Jackie said that Chris Tucker was singing and dancing Michael Jackson for 4 hours nonstop. And so that's why he does Don't Stop Till You Get Enough in the second movie. I found this really interesting interview with a woman who was hired to become his dialogue coach, Diana Wang.
Oh, this is cool. Yeah.
She's from San Francisco. And it's funny because when she did the interview for this movie, and she went on to work with him for 20 years. So they hit it off, but it was touch and go at first. When she spoke Cantonese to him, he said, "Where'd you learn how to speak? You have a weird accent. Was it in Malaysia?" And she said, "No, I learned how to speak Cantonese in San Francisco, in Chinatown." And he says, "It sounds like you're in pain." But she was doing this oral history for Rice University, and she said, "Jackie is not a very patient man when it comes to dialogue." So it was just crazy. I would write down his lines in English, and I would break it down into syllables. And sometimes I would write like another English word that was similar to that word, or I would find a Chinese character that sounded like that word. And sometimes I would put little happy faces or sad faces to remind him where he needed to be emotionally. And you can see her in the bloopers. There's parts where he has like, the poor guy is really struggling, and she just like runs over and says something in his ear and then like runs back. And she said the dialogue is the last thing on his mind. So often it was me running after him with his lines, screaming them out so that he could try to remember, because he walks fast. So I'm carrying my backpack, I'm carrying his lines, I'm screaming his lines as we run to set. Sometimes I would get into his trailer, and there'll be 10 people in his trailer, and he'll tell me to sit down and wait, and he'll do meetings with each person, and I would be the last person he talks to. But by the time it was my turn to talk to him, they wanted us on the set. He didn't have a chance to look at his dialogue. So making Rush Hour was really scary because I thought I would be fired. Every week, I was expecting someone to fire me because I didn't feel like we were doing a very good job. We were struggling constantly in every scene, and you can tell in the outtakes, but the entire film was like that. Every single day, every single scene, every single sentence was a struggle. Sometimes we did a line 20 times, 30 times, whatever it took to get it right. And of course, it was hard on his ego. And often when he looked at me, I could see hatred. He didn't seem to enjoy this process at all. So I didn't know whether I would be fired by him or fired by production because I didn't feel like we were doing a very good job. But she did.
We're going to take a quick break, but we'll be right back with more Too Much Information in just a moment.
Another stumbling block in the production was the fact that Jackie Chan was used to working in Hong Kong or other foreign locations with his own stunt team, who had been together since like 83, 85. And Ratner had to convince New Line to let them bring the entire stunt team over to work on the movie, alongside an American stunt coordinator named Terry Leonard, who had done like Raiders of the Lost Ark and a lot of stuff. He's a big name. And in that making of, Leonard very dryly notes, they take liberties with Jackie on some of those films in Hong Kong and throughout other parts of the world that we're not allowed to take here, insurance-wise. It's the most flat way of saying that. And he talks about coming onto set and Jackie looking up at all of the scaffolding that they had set up to help him do a stunt and going, you Americans, so safe.
I love this anecdote so much because in every retelling of it that I've seen, Jackie was apparently very displeased by all these safety precautions. And this scene in particular with the scaffolding, it's worth noting, it required him to climb 30 feet up the side of a building, the building that was supposed to be the Chinese consulate. And Jackie later explained his annoyance. He said, "There are so many safety and insurance rules to follow. I know that they want to make sure I'm safe when I do my stunts, but sometimes they insist I use protective gear for even simple things, and that's frustrating. It takes so much time." And also, speaking of the Chinese consulate, the exterior of the Chinese consulate in Rush Hour is the exterior of the Wayne Manor from the 60s Batman TV show. Did you know that?
I don't think I did.
You're a big
actually.
fan of
Yeah.
both. I'm surprised.
I am. Yeah. Chris Tucker said he also did his own stunts in the film. He told Conan O'Brien, on the first movie, I got in shape because I heard Jackie does his own stunts. So I said, let me get in shape. And I started doing it and everything. Because if you don't come out there, Jackie will tease you. Chris Tucker, are you scared? Come, we'll do your stunts. Stop acting like a punk. I would cry.
Yeah, how many supporting actors has he killed by doing that?
That's also true. Yeah. Yeah, his post Rush Hour career is really.
I'm on his Wikipedia page as we speak. I have no idea. He was in Silver Linings Playbook. I forgot about that. He's done 98 Rush Hour, 2001 Rush Hour 2, 2007 Rush Hour 3, 2012 Silver Linings Playbook. That is all he did from 1998 to 2012. 2016 Billy Lynn's Long Halftime Walk, which I've never heard of, and then he's going to be in the upcoming movie Air with Ben Affleck and Matt Damon about the founder of Nike. He has not done a lot of movies.
No, and I mean, it's like I said, it's kind of sad. I mean, Brett, in that GQ interview, Brett Ratner says he says people have mistreated him in Hollywood, which I don't think is necessarily true. But
Chris Tucker?
No, Jackie. But you were talking about Chris Tucker.
I was talking about Chris Tucker. Yeah,
I don't care about Chris Tucker.
Oh.
This isn't the Chris Tucker episode. No, I'm sorry. I do care about Chris Tucker. He's great in this movie. He's hilarious in Fifth Element. We watched Fifth Element recently. And actually, Brett Ratner knew him because I didn't know this about Brett Ratner, but he got his start through Def Jam, essentially.
It was the NYU connection, I think.
Yes, it was. Ratner, while he was at NYU, had been the manager and executive producer for a group of white boy rappers called BMOC, for Big Man on Campus, which is a terrible sentence, and it only gets worse because he is named along with fellow alleged sexual predator Russell Simmons, who he calls his mentor, because Russell gave him a screening for Ratner's film Whatever Happened to Mason Reese about the child star. And that essentially led him to getting a bunch of music video directing gigs with guys like Public Enemy, Jay-Z, Mariah Carey, Madonna, and then he made Money Talks. And Chris Tucker was a Def Jam comic. And so the soundtrack for Rush Hour, which it will not surprise you to know, was made in very close association with Def Jam. I think their name is actually on the release. And it features Drew Hill's biggest hit, How Deep Is Your Love, which is not a Bee Gees cover. Jay-Z's Can I Getta, which is what I remember, like the first time I heard Jay-Z was on this. The soundtrack was a hit. It hit 5 on the Billboard Top 200, went platinum in 3 months.
We were just talking about this in some episode, like late 90s or golden era.
Late 90s soundtracks.
City of Angels soundtrack, Armageddon soundtrack.
I had the Godzilla soundtrack. Yeah. That'd be a fun show, man.
Just talking about movie
Just going
soundtracks.
through movie soundtracks. Just the batch stuff that, like, I mean, Kiss from a Rose, Space Jam.
It's not a bad idea.
You know, they just all have so many. It's when you look at the numbers behind them and the acts that people brought together and corralled, and there's so little about it.
Yeah.
You know, like I tried to look this up, like, because all these songs came out on other people's records then, but it's just so the synergy between like Def Jam and this major movie.
And we were talking about that during the way back for the Lady Marmalade episode too.
Yeah,
and, with Moulin Rouge and Lady Marmalade.
Where were we?
Well, where were we? Brett Ratner. I mean, when I was at NYU, the faculty loved Brett Ratner, presumably because he was a big donor, and they would always kind of shove him down our throats for different kind of like special guest events.
Right.
And the student body sort of instinctively knew that he was not somebody that we wanted to emulate, and we were proven right. Yeah. Yeah, there's a story from the set of Rush Hour that I wince at in the aftermath of his sexual assault allegations now. Elizabeth Pena, who played Detective Tanya Thompson, she apparently was so bored after being kept waiting in her trailer for 5 hours before shooting a scene that she eventually came onto the set wearing the bomb-proof vest that her character's supposed to wear and nothing else. And she recalls Brett Ratner, quote, turning ketchup red, shrinking about 4 inches, and saying, Pena, man, don't do that. It makes me nervous. I fear what sort of things he said and did when the crew wasn't around.
Yeah. Moving on. It may surprise you to know that all 3 Rush Hour films were scored by Lalo Schifrin, The
What?
architect.
I guess the Mission Impossible.
Mission Impossible
I can
theme.
see the
Yeah,
overlap.
the architect of the 70s cop funk martial arts sound. He did Bullet, all the Dirty Harry movies, Enter the Dragon. And he said that
Oh, I didn't know
he
that.
said that that's why Brett Ratner tapped him. He said, Brett is a big fan of mine, and Enter the Dragon has been one of his favorite movies of all time. To an interview with Ain't It Cool News, a name I've not heard in a long time.
Yeah, wow.
And then Schifrin says, in his residence, which is funny, but he's from Argentina, so I'll allow it. He has an answering machine that when he's not there, plays the music of Enter the Dragon, which Schifrin composed. So that's very funny to me. And when he said he was approached for Rush Hour, Brett was like, I want you to do Enter the Dragon for the 90s. I don't know. I can't remember anything about the score to this movie, but it's just funny to me that they got Layla Schifrin.
And now we're in a part of the show that you've titled Reception Hour. We never read your headings enough on the show whenever you in your outlines. They're always so good. I feel bad. Rush Hour made its budget back on its opening weekend and went on to gross $244 million worldwide. And you've described it as sort of a pleasant middlebrow hit with critics, though a lot of people who knew Jackie Chan's Hong Kong work, including yourself, were very let down that it watered down his sensibilities somewhat. But obviously, it spawned a whole franchise, with Chris Tucker getting a bump up to $20 million for Rush Hour 2.
Hell yes.
And then Jackie Chan, of course, went on to star in Shanghai Noon, which basically replicated the Rush Hour formula with Owen Wilson playing the Chris Tucker role set in the Wild West, and a string of other pretty disappointing.
The Tuxedo?
I would imagine.
You ever see the Tuxedo?
Yeah. No, I haven't really seen other than Rush Hour and the Shanghai franchise. I don't think I've ever seen a Jackie Chan movie start to finish. Are there any post Rush Hour that I'm missing?
Nope.
Okay.
Jackie Chan Adventures, the animated series.
Did you ever watch that?
No, I didn't. Because
you
again,
would've
like
too
when
old,
this
I
came
guess,
out,
yeah.
I was like, yeah, this is all fine, but I'm gonna go watch the really bad stuff, not this
Right,
like
yes.
Disney version.
I mean, one of the reasons for this sort of disappointing string of movies for Jackie Chan after the success of Rush Hour was his age. He was 41 years old when he made Rumble in the Bronx, which was before Rush Hour. And so, as you very eloquently put it, Jackie was nearing the upper limit of his ability to destroy his body in the name of arts. Which is a beautiful way to put that. And he was also pretty open about being disappointed with Hollywood. And he basically admitted to doing American movies just to fund better projects in China. And of Rush Hour, Jackie Chan wrote on his website in 2015, when we finished filming, I felt very disappointed because it was a movie I didn't appreciate and I did not like the action scenes involved. I felt the style of action was too Americanized and I didn't understand the American sense of humor. And he also said that he made the sequel to Rush Hour because he was offered, quote, an irresistible amount of money to do it. And then he said of the third Rush Hour film, nothing particularly stood out that made this movie special for me.
Yeah, he's very blunt about it. There's an interview with a magazine called Crosswalk from 2002 where he talks about just being puzzled by why this movie did well. He said, something I don't like is successful, like Rush Hour. I make the movie and I tell my manager, see, I should never make this kind of movie. Then I go to Asia to make an Asian film. And they call me and say, Jackie, Rush Hour is a big hit. It's a success. I say, what? Then I make Rush Hour 2, and I hate it. Worse than Rush Hour 1. And they call me and say, it's a success. Then I slowly realize, okay, I still have Chinese mind. I have hometown mind. I don't get American culture, American dialogue. So now, from that time on, I really listen to whatever Owen Wilson tells me to say, whatever Chris Tucker tells me to say. I realize, okay, anything I think not funny means it's funny. And it's telling because also in that interview, he says that Rush Hour films didn't do well in Hong Kong. Like he Accidental Spy, Tuxedo, like they didn't do well in Hong Kong. So I don't, I'm not super well versed in what the cultural distinctions or differences are there are. I mean, Jackie Chan's like Elvis in Hong Kong, like Brett Ratner talks about, like Chris Tucker, they when they went to do Rush Hour 2 there, they were like, we couldn't walk down the street with him. It was like, it was insane. But I don't understand what kind of the cultural hangups there would be. I really only have to reason that they are just not as interested in seeing one of their own stars be put into a milieu that is not explicitly catered to him as much. But what do I know?
Yeah, Jackie was even more blunt in another interview. He said that he remembers telling his manager after Rush Hour is released, "That's a terrible movie. They don't allow me to do my own style of action. My English isn't good. Chris Tucker's English, I don't understand. Terrible movie." But hey.
Yeah. Supposedly, they're in talks for Rush Hour 4.
Oh, God.
That's the coda to this whole thing.
Isn't he like pushing 70?
Yeah, I don't know, man. I mean, he's talked about like I can't do these stunts anymore, blah blah blah. But there's something. He just all the world's a stage. He just loves entertaining the people.
I'm seeing a lot of overlap between him, not in terms of discipline and skill, but in terms of that same
Tom Cruise.
Something that's I was gonna say the Jackass guys.
Oh,
Johnny Knoxville.
Yeah. I don't know. There was a movie that he made called The Foreigner with Pierce Brosnan that I think tried to put him in the sort of wizened, dignified, like elder statesman gravitas role that I haven't seen it. I'm not sure how well it did, but we'll always have Rumble in the Bronx. No, I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but this movie is really fascinating as a specific cultural artifact in time. You look at the top 10 grossing films of 98, Titanic, Armageddon, Saving Private Ryan, There's Something About Mary, Waterboy, Deep Impact, Godzilla, and Good Will Hunting. And of those films, plus the next two, only Dr. Dolittle and Rush Hour had minority leads. So that is a very groundbreaking thing in terms of bringing these international stars over. It was also kind of a big trend because one of the guy who I would say is in number 2 to Jackie coming from Hong Kong martial arts films into Hollywood is Jet Li. Jet Li had his big Hollywood moment right around this time with Lethal Weapon 4, where he basically just comes in and does a bunch of really cool martial arts stuff. And then they started importing some of his films, like Black Mask came out, which was a Hong Kong production that like the RZA rescored and they redubbed and put it out in theaters. And then he was in Romeo Must Die, which is pretty explicitly also an attempt to be like, black people like kung fu movies. Let's make a movie with a big kung fu star and a bunch of hip hop people. So that's Romeo Must Die. Then he was in The One with starring Jason Statham. And then he got into the Expendables franchise. So, not that you can chalk all that up to Jackie and Rush Hour, but there's a convincing through line there. And then the other thing, too, is The Matrix comes out. And The Matrix not only takes the John Woo stuff, the gun ballet and the gun choreography, but it takes the wire work and it takes the Yen Wo Ping is a choreographer, and it takes all this stuff that the Shaw brothers and all these guys have been doing and synthesizes it into American sci-fi and action conventions. And it is obviously a huge hit. Blade comes out from New Line Cinema, which is, again, kind of a synthesis of black hip-hop culture and black culture. And Wesley Snipes is a huge star of the era and big martial arts guy. And then, we get Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon comes in. And that's an interesting case study, too, because that is less genre blending. That is explicitly a wuxia film, which is this, historical. It's like a historical epic action film, but that was huge Oscar bait, and that I don't know that it launched or solidified Chow Yun-fat and Michelle Yeoh and even Ang Lee, but Ang Lee did get Incredible Hulk a few years after that, which that movie is not good, but. Those movies all broke through kind of around the same time. And even those wuxia things had their brief period of vogue. Right after Crouching Tiger, House of Flying Daggers with Zhang Ziyi, who was in that movie, came out. And then Jet Li did Fearless and Hero. Hero is a beautiful movie. And so, yeah, there was this really brief moment in time when all of this stuff kind of came in on the back on Jackie's broken back. So I don't know. I think it's a really, even as much as I say it's kind of a letdown to me as a hardcore fan of his, and it's a silly film and he doesn't like it. It's very important and it's a really fascinating period of time. And then we even got, I won't necessarily make this claim, but Andrew Lau and Andy Lau, who are not the same person or related, apparently, made Infernal Affairs, which became The Departed 4 years later.
Right.
And around this time, we also got a brief spate of martial arts comedies. You remember Shaolin Soccer? You remember Kung Fu Hustle? Those wouldn't exist without
God,
Jackie.
yeah.
Steve Odenkirk doing Kung Pao, which is a ridiculous film, but that wouldn't exist without Jackie, you know? So you can pin a good 5 or 6 years of Hollywood, mainstream Hollywood movies on his little broken body. So there's that. And perhaps the biggest shadow that the film casts is that we have Rush Hour and Jackie Chan to thank for Rotten Tomatoes. Did you know this? This is my Jay. That's my Jay Leno voice. Did you hear about this? Did you guys hear about this Rotten Tomatoes? Rotten Tomatoes was launched in August of 1998 by a developer named Sen Dong, who was a fan of Jackie and wanted to create a website that would aggregate reviews of Jackie Chan movies and Hong Kong movies as they were imported into the States. He wanted to launch it with the timing of Rush Hour, so it came out a month before because Rush Hour's release date was pushed. And now we have Rotten Tomatoes, which is arguably not great. I mean, you know, there's a lot of controversy about the way that like fanboy communities weaponize it against movies they don't like, and won't get into that. But you can thank Rush Hour for it. So there's that.
It's got that going for it, which is nice.
Well, that was sprawling. Good luck editing that. And you know, thanks for listening. I feel kind of bad. Maybe should have gone deeper on Chris Tucker, but I wanted to backdoor this in as my love of Jackie Chan, and I hope everybody can get on board with that and recognize him and, you know, fet him appropriately. Folks, thank you for listening. This has been Too Much Information. I'm Alex Heigl.
And I'm Jordan Runtagh. We'll catch you next time. Too Much Information was a production of iHeart Radio.
The show's executive producers are Noel Brown and Jordan Runtagh.
The show's supervising producer is Michael Alder June.
The show was researched, written, and hosted by Jordan Runtagh and Alex Heigl.
With original music by Seth Applebaum and the Ghost Funk Orchestra. If you like what you heard, please subscribe and leave us a review. For more podcasts on iHeart Radio, visit the iHeart Radio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.